The alarm on the small phone buzzed softly before the sun came up. The tiny apartment was still quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists early in the morning when the whole city is asleep. The man reached over and turned the alarm off before it could wake the child sleeping in the next room. For a moment, he just sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face and trying to wake up. The room was simple. A small bed, an old wooden chair, and a narrow table where a laptop sat beside a few tools used for fixing computers. The paint on the wall had started to fade, and the heater in the corner made a light clicking sound. He stood up slowly and walked to the small window. Outside, the sky was still gray. A few streetlights were glowing, and the road looked empty except for a delivery truck moving slowly down the street. This had been his routine for a long time now. Quiet mornings, long days of work, and everything he did was for the small child sleeping in the other room. A few years earlier, life had looked very different. Back then, the apartment had felt full of laughter and conversation. There had been plans, dreams, and long evenings where the family would sit together and talk about the future. But life can change quickly. After losing his wife to an illness that came suddenly, everything became heavier. The silence in the apartment felt deeper. At first, even simple things felt impossible. Cooking dinner, paying bills, getting the child ready for school, fixing broken appliances. All the things two people once shared now rested on one pair of tired shoulders. But quitting was never an option. Every morning, he reminded himself of the same thing. Someone small depended on him. He walked into the tiny kitchen and quietly started preparing breakfast. The kitchen counter held only a few items: a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a small carton of milk. He toasted 2 slices of bread and poured the milk into a cup decorated with faded cartoon drawings. While the toast cooled, he opened his old laptop and checked the messages from customers. Most of his work came through small online posts or recommendations from people in the neighborhood. He repaired computers for anyone who needed help. Broken screens, slow systems, software problems. Sometimes the work paid well. Other times it barely covered the cost of groceries. But he never complained. People trusted him because he worked honestly and never overcharged. Just as he finished checking his messages, small footsteps padded softly down the hallway. A sleepy voice spoke. "Are you already awake?" He turned around and smiled. The child stood there rubbing sleepy eyes, wearing oversized pajamas and holding a small stuffed toy. "Good morning," he said gently. The child walked over and climbed into the chair at the tiny table. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. The child nodded slowly. He placed the toast on a plate and slid it across the table. "Eat slowly. School bus comes soon." The child took a bite and looked up at him. "Are you fixing computers today again?" He laughed softly. "Yes. Someone has to keep all those computers behaving." The child smiled. The mornings were always his favorite part of the day. No stress. No rushing customers. Just a few quiet minutes before the busy world started moving again. After breakfast, he helped pack a small school bag. Inside were a notebook, a pencil case, and a lunch he had prepared the night before. Soon they were walking outside together. The air was cold, and the street was slowly coming to life. Cars began appearing, and a coffee shop on the corner opened its doors. At the bus stop, the child turned and hugged him tightly before climbing onto the school bus. He waved until the bus disappeared down the road. Then the real day began. He returned to the apartment and grabbed his worn tool bag. Inside were screwdrivers, cables, a small testing device, and a few spare parts. These tools had helped him earn a living for years. Before leaving, he looked once more around the small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was home. Outside, the city had fully awakened now. People rushed toward offices, cafes filled with customers, and traffic lights changed endlessly as cars moved through the busy streets. His first job of the day was at a small electronics shop across town. A shop owner had called the night before about a computer that refused to start. He took the bus there, sitting near the window while watching the city pass by. Tall glass buildings stood beside older brick structures. Some people walked confidently in expensive clothes, talking on phones and carrying briefcases. He sometimes wondered what their lives were like, but those thoughts never lasted long. He had work to do, The electronics shop smelled faintly of plastic and warm machines. The owner greeted him with relief. "You came early," the man said. "Always try to," he replied. The problem turned out to be a damaged power connection inside the computer. It took him about an hour to repair. The owner tested the machine and smiled. "You saved me again." He thanked the owner and packed his tools. As he stepped outside, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked the screen and saw an unknown number. Usually he ignored numbers he didn't recognize, but something made him answer this time. "Hello." A professional voice spoke on the other side. "Good morning. Is this a computer technician who handles system repairs?" "Yes," he said cautiously. "My company was given your number by someone who said you solved difficult problems." He shifted his tool bag onto his shoulder. "What kind of problem?" "Our CEO's computer system is having issues. None of the internal technicians could fix it." He raised an eyebrow. Most large companies had their own IT teams. It was unusual for them to call someone like him. "Are you sure you have the right person?" he asked. "Yes," the voice replied calmly. "We heard you specialize in complex fixes." He hesitated. Large corporate jobs could pay well, but they could also be stressful. "Where is the office?" he asked. The voice gave him the address. He recognized the location immediately. It was one of the tallest buildings in the city, a place where powerful business leaders worked. For a moment, he looked down at his worn shoes and simple jacket. Then he remembered the school bus that had driven away earlier. "All right," he said. "When should I come?" "As soon as possible." The call ended. He stood there quietly for a moment, staring at the tall buildings in the distance. Jobs like this didn't happen often. He didn't know exactly why they had chosen him, but he knew one thing. If the repair went well, it might mean better opportunities. And maybe, just maybe, life could become a little easier. He adjusted the strap of his tool bag and started walking toward the bus stop again. Across the city, the tall glass building waited, shining under the afternoon sun. Inside that building worked one of the most powerful women in the business world. Her company controlled millions of dollars in deals and investments. Employees spoke about her with respect, sometimes even with fear. Very few people saw her smile, and very few people spoke to her like an ordinary human being. In just a few hours, a tired single father carrying a simple tool bag would walk through those doors. He believed he was going there to fix a computer, but he had no idea that a single unexpected moment inside that office would quietly change both of their lives. The tall glass building stood in the center of the business district, like a giant mirror reflecting the afternoon sun. People in suits moved quickly in and out of the main entrance, holding phones and briefcases, talking about meetings and numbers. Expensive cars pulled up to front doors while security guards watched carefully from both sides. When the single father stepped off the bus across the street, he paused for a moment. He adjusted the strap of his worn tool bag and looked up at the building. The glass walls rose high above the surrounding streets. He had repaired computers in many places before, small apartments, crowded offices, local shops, but this place felt different. It felt important. He crossed the street and walked toward the entrance. The automatic glass doors opened quietly as he approached. Inside, the lobby was wide and bright. The floor was polished, so clean it almost looked like water. Large lights hung from the ceiling, and a long reception desk stood near the center of the room. Behind the desk sat a receptionist dressed in a neat professional outfit. She looked up as he approached. "Hello," she said politely. "I received a call about repairing a computer," he explained, holding his tool bag. "I was told the company needs help with a system problem." She checked something on her screen and then nodded. "Yes, we were expecting you." Her tone sounded a little relieved. "Our internal technicians tried all morning but couldn't solve the issue." She handed him a visitor badge. "Please take the elevator to the 32nd floor. Someone will meet you there." He thanked her and walked toward the elevator. As the elevator doors closed, he noticed his reflection in the shiny metal walls. His jacket looked slightly worn compared to the expensive clothes worn by the people in the lobby. His tool bag looked simple next to their briefcases, but he reminded himself why he was here. He was here to fix a problem. The elevator moved quickly upward. stopping only once before reaching the 32nd floor. When the doors opened, he stepped into a quiet hallway with thick carpet that softened every footstep. A man in a dark suit was already waiting nearby. "You must be the technician," the man said. "Yes. Please come with me." They walked down the hallway past several glass offices. Inside, employees worked at large desks filled with computers and papers. Some looked up curiously as he passed. They finally stopped outside a large office with wooden doors. The man lowered his voice slightly. "This is the CEO's office." He nodded. "Her computer system froze during an important report this morning. Our IT team tried everything." The man gave a small, nervous smile. "She doesn't like delays." He gently knocked on the door. A calm voice from inside replied, "Come in." The office was larger than his entire apartment. Tall windows covered one wall, showing an incredible view of the city below. Shelves filled with books lined another wall, and a large desk stood near the center of the room. Behind the desk sat the CEO. She looked focused, studying something on a tablet. Several documents were spread neatly across the desk. The man in the suit spoke. "The technician has arrived." She looked up. Her expression was calm and professional. There was confidence in the way she sat, but also a quiet seriousness that made the room feel more formal. "Thank you," she said. The man nodded and quietly left the office. For a moment, the room became silent. The single father placed his tool bag gently beside the desk. "Where's the computer?" he asked. She turned the laptop toward him. "It froze during a system update. Nothing responds now." He pulled the chair slightly closer and began examining the laptop. Years of experience had trained his eyes to recognize problems quickly. He checked the screen, keyboard, and ports before opening a small toolkit from his bag. While he worked, the CEO continued reviewing documents. The only sounds in the room were the quiet clicks of tools and the faint noise of traffic far below the building. After a few minutes, he realized the problem was more complicated than it first appeared. The system update had interrupted several internal processes, causing multiple software conflicts. He connected a small device to the laptop and began carefully navigating the system files. "This may take a little time," he said. "That's fine," she replied calmly. He focused on the screen, slowly working through the repair. Then something unexpected happened. While opening one of the system folders, another folder accidentally appeared on the screen. It wasn't labeled like a work document or a report. Instead, it looked personal. Before he could close it, several photos suddenly appeared on the display. They were pictures of the CEO. Some looked like professional photographs from events or interviews. Others looked more personal, taken in quiet places like parks or cafes. He immediately felt uncomfortable. He quickly looked away from the screen, reaching for mouse to close the folder. But the movement caught her attention. She looked up from her tablet. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated. For a moment, he considered pretending nothing had happened. But honesty had always been important to him. "A folder opened by accident while I was fixing the system," he explained quietly. "It looks like personal photos." The room became very still. For a second, he wondered if he had said the wrong thing. But instead of reacting with anger, she simply leaned back slightly in her chair. "Let me see." He turned the laptop slowly so she could look at the screen. The photos were still there. She studied them silently. Then she looked back at him. Her expression had changed. The confident business leader was still there, but something softer had appeared in her eyes. "Did you see them?" she asked. He nodded slightly. "Yes, but only for a moment." He expected her to tell him to close the folder immediately. Instead, she asked something completely unexpected. Her voice was calm, but there was something uncertain in it. "Be honest," she said. He waited. "Do you think I'm pretty?" The question surprised him so much that he didn't answer right away. In all his years repairing computers, no customer had ever asked him something like that, especially not someone who ran one of the biggest companies in the city. For a moment, he thought he had misunderstood the question, but the way she looked at him told him she was serious. There was no arrogance in her voice, no pride, only quiet curiosity. He suddenly realized something strange about the moment. All the power and importance that surrounded her. The huge office, the tall building, the expensive furniture. seemed to disappear for a second. In that moment, she didn't look like a powerful CEO. She looked like a normal person waiting for an honest answer. He carefully closed the photo folder on the screen and turned the laptop back toward himself. Then he looked at her. "I wasn't expecting that question," he said gently. A faint smile touched her lips. "Most people don't." He took a breath, choosing his words carefully. Years of raising a child had taught him that honesty could be kind at the same time. "I think you are," he said simply. She watched his face closely, as if trying to see whether he was just being polite, but his expression stayed calm and sincere. There was no flattery in his voice, just honesty. For a moment, she didn't say anything. The silence in the large office felt different now, less formal, almost thoughtful. Outside the tall windows, the city continued moving far below, unaware that a small and unexpected conversation had just begun inside one quiet office high above the streets. For a few seconds after he answered, the room stayed very quiet. The city outside the tall windows kept moving like always. Cars flowed through the streets below. People walked along sidewalks, rushing to meetings or heading home from work. But inside the large office, time seemed to slow down. The CEO looked at him carefully, as if she was trying to understand whether his words were real or just something polite. Most people who spoke to her usually chose their words carefully. They often tried to impress her or say whatever they thought she wanted to hear. But the man sitting across from her didn't look nervous in that way. He simply looked honest. She leaned back slightly in her chair and crossed her arms, still studying him. "You answered that very quickly," she said. He shrugged a little. "You asked for honesty." A faint smile appeared on her face again, though it disappeared just as quickly. "Most people in this building would give a much longer answer," she said. "I'm not very good at long answers," he replied. That made her smile again, this time a little more naturally. He turned his attention back to the laptop and continued working on the repair. The system files were still loading slowly as he corrected the broken update. Lines of code appeared on the screen while the repair process continued. But even though he was focused on computer, he could feel that she was still thinking about the question she had asked. After a moment, she spoke again. "Why did you say yes?" He paused for a second before answering. "Because it's true." She tilted her head slightly. "People say that to me all the time," she said, "usually during interviews or business events." "That's different," he replied calmly. "How?" "Those people probably want something from you." The answer surprised her again. Most employees in the company would never speak so directly, but there was no disrespect in his voice, only simple honesty. He continued adjusting a few system settings while he spoke. "I fix computers for many people," he said. "Small shops, offices, sometimes people in their homes. When someone asks a question like that, I usually think they don't want a complicated answer." She watched him quietly. "So, what kind of answer do they want?" "A real one." He looked up from the laptop briefly. "That's what I try to give you." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood up from her chair and walked toward the large windows. Her reflection appeared faintly in the glass as she looked down at the busy city below. From up here, the people on the streets looked very small. "You know," she said slowly, "I run a company that employs thousands of people." He nodded. "I guess it was something big." She gave a small laugh. "That's an understatement." She rested one hand on the window frame. "Every day I meet investors, partners, reporters, and executives. They talk about profits, markets, strategies, growth numbers." She turned slightly to look at him. "But very few of them talk to me like you just did." He didn't know what to say to that, so he stayed quiet and kept working. Sometimes silence was better than forcing words. The repair program on the laptop finally moved to the next step. The system restarted briefly before loading again. He watched the screen carefully. Behind him, she continued speaking. "When I was younger," she said, "people used to criticize my appearance a lot." Her voice was calm, but there was a faint memory of something difficult behind it. "They said I looked too serious, too plain, not the kind of person who belonged at big events." He glanced back at her for a moment. She wasn't looking at him now. She was looking at the city again. "At first I ignored it," she continued. "I focused on studying, working harder than everyone else. Eventually, I built this company from almost nothing. He had already guessed that she had worked hard for her success. There was something about the way she carried herself that showed it. But sometimes, she said quietly, those old words stay in your mind longer than you expect. The repair program finished scanning the system files. He began closing several damaged processes that had caused the computer to freeze earlier. I think a lot of people carry things like that, he said. She turned toward him again. You do? He nodded. Life teaches everyone something difficult. She studied him for a moment. You sound like someone who has experienced a lot. He gave a small smile. I think everyone has. The laptop screen flickered as the final repair commands started running. Only a few minutes remained now. She walked back toward her desk, but didn't sit down. Instead, she leaned against the edge of the desk, still watching him. You didn't seem nervous when you walked into this office, she said. That's because I was thinking about the computer problem. She laughed softly. Most people get nervous just standing in this room. I've fixed computers in much stranger places, he replied. Stranger than this office? Much stranger. That made her curious. Like where? He thought for a moment. Once inside a bakery where flour dust was floating everywhere, he said. Another time inside a small fishing boat while it was still rocking in the water. She smiled at the image. That must have been difficult. It was, he admitted. But computers are all the same inside. He tapped lightly on the laptop keyboard as the repair finished. They just need patience. The system finally restarted again. This time the desktop appeared smoothly, without freezing. He checked a few programs, opened several files, and tested the update process again. Everything worked perfectly. He closed the final window and turned the laptop toward her. It should be fixed now. She stepped closer and looked at the screen. Everything responded instantly. The reports opened. The system moved smoothly between programs. Relief appeared in her expression. That was faster than our entire IT department managed this morning. He packed his tools back into the bag. They probably tried more complicated solutions first. She sat down again, still looking at the computer. Then she looked back at him. You gave me an honest answer earlier, she said. Yes. She studied him again, as if deciding whether to ask something else. Tell me something, she said. He waited. When you said I was pretty, did you mean only the photo? He shook his head gently. No. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Then what did you mean? He thought for a moment before answering. I meant the way you carry yourself, he said. The way you speak calmly even when your system crashes, and everyone else is nervous. She blinked in surprise. That's not the answer I expected. It's the one I meant. She looked down at the desk, thinking quietly. For the first time since he entered the office, the powerful Sil looked thoughtful in a very human way. The conversation had started with a broken computer, but now it felt like something else had quietly begun between them, something honest. And neither of them realized yet how important that simple conversation would become. For a moment after he finished speaking, neither of them said anything. The laptop was now working perfectly, but the conversation had quietly shifted into something deeper than a simple repair job. The CEO leaned back in her chair again, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the desk. She looked at him in a thoughtful way, as if trying to figure something out. You speak very calmly, she said after a moment. He gave a small shrug while closing his tool bag. I fix problems for a living, he replied. If I panic every time something breaks, nothing would ever get fixed. That answer made her smile again. Most people who came into her office were either extremely formal or overly nervous. Some tried too hard to impress her. Others carefully watched every word they said. But this man acted like he was simply doing his job. Nothing more. Nothing less. She tapped her fingers lightly on the desk. You mentioned earlier that life teaches everyone something difficult, she said. Yes. What did it teach you? He paused for a second before answering, not because he didn't want to respond, but because he always tried to choose simple words for serious things. A few years ago, he said slowly, my wife passed away. The room grew quieter. He continued speaking calmly. It happened very suddenly. After that, everything changed. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. I had to learn how to do everything alone, he said. Work, raise a child, keep the apartment running. Her expression softened slightly. That must have been very hard. It was, he admitted. But when someone small depends on you, you don't have time to sit still and feel sorry for yourself. The words were not dramatic. He spoke about it the same way someone might talk about repairing a broken chair or fixing a door. Just another part of life. You have a child? She asked. Yes. How old? Still in school. She nodded slowly. For a moment she imagined his life. A small apartment somewhere in the city. Early mornings. Long days of work. A child waiting at home. It was a very different world from her own. Do they know what you do for work? She asked. He smiled slightly. They think I'm some kind of computer hero. That made her laugh quietly. A computer hero? Yes, he said. Every time I fix something, I get a very serious thank you. That sounds like the best kind of reward. It is. He stood up slowly, ready to leave now that the repair was finished. But before he could pick up his tool bag, she spoke again. Wait a moment. He paused. She stood up and walked around the desk. For the first time since he entered the office, she wasn't standing behind the large desk that created distance between them. Now they were simply two people standing in the same room. Can I ask you something else? She said. Of course. Why didn't you seem impressed when you walked in here? The question surprised him. Impressed? Yes, she said. Most people look around the office, the view, the building. They usually comment on it. He glanced around the room for a moment. The office was beautiful. The furniture looked expensive. The windows showed an incredible view of the city. And the entire space felt powerful. But he simply smiled. I noticed it, he said. And it's very nice. She raised an eyebrow. That's all. He laughed quietly. I've learned something over the years. What's that? A big office doesn't change what kind of person someone is. The sentence hung gently in the air. She studied him carefully again. And what kind of person do you think I am? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her the same way he had looked at the computer earlier. Carefully, patiently, without rushing to conclusions. I think, he said slowly, you're someone who worked very hard to get here. Her eyes widened slightly. And I think you carry a lot of responsibility. That part was obvious, but she still listened closely. And I think, he continued, you don't hear honest things very often. That answer caught her completely off guard. For a moment she didn't speak. Because he was right. Most people around her spoke carefully. They told her what they thought she wanted to hear. They praised her decisions, her leadership, her success. But honest conversations were rare. You're very observant, she said quietly. It's part of fixing problems, he replied. She walked back toward the window again, folding her arms loosely as she looked at the skyline. Sometimes success feels strange, she said. How? People assume that if you build something big like this company, you must be completely confident all the time. He listened quietly. But confidence doesn't erase old memories, she continued. Those voices from the past sometimes stay longer than expected. He understood what she meant. You asked earlier if you were pretty, he said gently. Yes. I think the real question behind that was something else. She turned slightly. What do you mean? I think you were asking if people see you as a person, he said, or just as a CEO. The office fell silent again, because the words landed closer to the truth than she expected. She had spent years building the company, making difficult decisions, negotiating deals, and leading thousands of employees. But somewhere along the way, the world began seeing her more as a title than as a person. Maybe you're right, she admitted quietly. He picked up his tool bag. Well, he said, your computer works again. She walked back to the desk and looked at the laptop once more. Everything was still running perfectly. You solved the problem very quickly, she said. Sometimes the problem looks bigger than it really is. She smiled at that. Then she looked back at him. You know, she said thoughtfully, most repair technicians would have left immediately after finishing the job. I didn't want to be rude. You weren't. She paused, thinking carefully about something. Then she said something that surprised him. I'd like to know more about your work. He blinked slightly. My work? Yes, she said. How long you been repairing systems? What kind of project you've handled? He shrugged a little. I mostly fix things for small businesses and people in the neighborhood. And today you fixed a problem my entire IT department couldn't. He smiled modestly. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes helps. She nodded slowly. That answer told her something important. He wasn't arrogant about his skills. He simply did his work well. The sun outside the windows had started lowering the sky now, casting a warm golden light across the office. Neither of them realized it yet, but the simple repair visit that began earlier in the afternoon was slowly turning into something far more important. And by the time he walked out of that office, both of their lives would quietly begin moving in a new direction. The sun had begun to sink behind the tall buildings when he finally picked up his tool bag. Warm golden light filled the office, stretching across the polished floor and the large desk. The city outside the windows looked calmer now. Cars moved slower, and the streets below had started to glow with evening lights. He stood near the door, ready to leave. Thank you for the work, the CEO said as she closed the laptop gently. You solved a problem that kept my entire team busy all morning. It wasn't as complicated as it looked, he replied. She watched him for a moment, as if she was thinking about something carefully. You say that very casually, she said, but the technicians here are well trained. He smiled a little. Sometimes when people look at the same problem for too long, they miss the simple solution. She nodded slowly. That happens in business too. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It felt like the conversation was about to end, the way most work conversations do. He had fixed the computer, and now he would go back to the small life waiting for him outside the building. But just as he reached for the door handle, she spoke again. Before you go, can I ask you one more thing? He turned slightly. Of course. She walked around the desk again and stopped a few steps away from him. What are your plans for the future? The question caught him off guard. My future? He repeated. Yes. He thought for a moment. I suppose I'll keep doing the same work, he said. Repair computers, take care of my child, try to keep life steady. That's all. He shrugged lightly. It's enough for me. She studied his face, searching for any sign that he was hiding bigger dreams or secret ambitions. But his expression stayed calm and honest. He really meant it. A steady life, a safe home for his child, honest work. Those were his goals. You don't want something bigger? She asked. He thought about the question carefully. Bigger things can be good, he said, but they also come with bigger problems. She laughed quietly. That's the most accurate description of business leadership I've heard in years. He smiled. I believe you. She looked down at the laptop again for a moment. Then she looked back at him. You said earlier that your child thinks you're a computer hero. He chuckled softly. That's the official title at home. And how long have you been repairing systems? Almost 10 years. And before that, I studied basic software repair and electronics, he said. But life changed direction after my wife passed away. She nodded slowly. So you had to work wherever you could. Yes. And you built your business from small jobs. That's right. She walked slowly toward the window again. Outside, the sky was turning deeper shades of orange and purple. The city lights were beginning to appear one by one. Do you know something interesting? She said. What? This company also started very small. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Really? She nodded. At the beginning, it was just a tiny office with 2 computers and a borrowed desk. That's hard to imagine now. Most people can't imagine it, she said. She turned back toward him. But building something big takes time, patience, and the ability to solve problems calmly. Her eyes moved briefly toward the laptop, which you clearly have. He didn't know how to respond to that, so he simply nodded politely. Then she asked another unexpected question. Have you ever considered working for a company instead of doing repairs alone? He thought about it for a second. Not really. Why not? Because my schedule needs to be flexible, he explained. My child comes first. School schedules, doctor visits, homework. I need to be available. Her expression softened again. That makes sense. He expected the conversation to end there, but instead, She walked back to her desk and opened a drawer. After a moment, she took out a small card and placed it on the table. "Come here for a moment," she said. He stepped closer. She pushed the card toward him. It was a business card, but different from the ones he usually received from customers. The company logo was printed at the top, along with a phone number and an email address. "This is my direct contact," she said. He looked slightly confused. "I appreciate that," he said. "But the computer seems to be working fine now. That's not why I'm giving it to you." He looked at her again. "Then why?" She leaned back slightly against the desk. "Because I want to offer you something." He waited. "A job." For a second he thought he had misunderstood her. "A job," he repeated. "Yes." He blinked. "You already have an entire IT department." "That's true," she said. "But today someone outside the company solved the problem faster than all of them." He opened his mouth to respond, but she raised her hand gently. "Let me finish." He nodded. "I'm not talking about replacing anyone," she continued. "I'm talking about adding someone who sees problems differently." She paused briefly. "And someone who speaks honestly." He looked down at the card in his hand. "A company job usually means strict hours," he said. "It doesn't have to," she replied. "What do you mean?" "It means we can design a role that works for both sides." Now he looked even more surprised. "You would do that?" She smiled slightly. Good problem solvers are rare. He stayed quiet, thinking carefully. This opportunity felt big, much bigger than anything he expected when he walked into the building earlier that afternoon. But his first thought was still the same as always. "My child would need to come first," he said. "I understand that," she replied. "And sometimes I might need to leave early for school matters. That can be arranged. And if something important happens at home." She nodded. "You're a parent first," she said calmly. "I respect that." He looked down at the card again. For years, he had worked job to job, never knowing how much money the next week would bring. A stable position at a large company could change everything. Better income, stability, security, a better future for the child waiting at home. But more than that, he noticed something else. She wasn't offering the job out of pity. She respected his work, and that mattered. Finally, he looked up. "You're serious about this?" he asked. "Very." He thought for another moment. Then he gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Well," he said, "this might be the most unexpected computer repair job I've ever had." She laughed softly. "I imagine it is." He placed a business card carefully inside his tool bag. "I should think about it," he said. "Of course." Then he reached for the door again. "Thank you," she said as he opened it. "For fixing the computer," she added. He nodded politely. "And thank you," she said again after a small pause, "for answering my question honestly." He smiled gently. Sometimes simple questions deserve simple answers. Then he stepped out into the hallway. A few minutes later, he was riding the elevator back down to the lobby, the same tool bag resting on his shoulder. But this time something felt different. Earlier that day, he had walked into the building thinking only about fixing a broken laptop. Now he walked out carrying the possibility of a completely new chapter in life. Outside, the evening air felt cooler as he stepped onto the street. City lights reflected off the glass walls of the tall building behind him. He took out his phone and looked at the time. Soon it would be time to meet the school bus again. He smiled quietly to himself, because tonight, when the child asked how his day went, he would have quite a story to tell. And somewhere high above the city, in an office filled with fading sunset light, a powerful Syl sat quietly at her desk. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about profits or meetings. She was thinking about a simple moment earlier that afternoon, a moment when someone answered her question honestly. And sometimes, the most powerful moments in life begin with the simplest question of all. Am I pretty?